camera. But from our dark shots of the stalker in our film opening, we found that because the shots were dark and we were quite close up with the character, we had to use the manual focus, and the first time we filmed it, we didn't use that. So we had to go back and reshoot it to make it better and make sure we focused on exactly the right parts that we wanted. For example, like either his hands circling the picture of the girl's face or just his face. This would have been easier for us to do when we first filmed it, as we had to go back and reshoot it. It didn't give us much time for our editing, and we found that took us a lot of time. So it would have been easier if we had done this the first time around.
One of the things we've learned about technology is about how important sound is for the film opening. We found that recording the sound whilst filming would have probably been a much better idea than trying to record the sound afterwards. For example, we had the girl putting on some makeup, and she put down and picked up her makeup brushes, and we had to add in such detailed Foley to this part, which was really awkward to get in the right timing. And this was the same as when our stalker was sitting and circling the photos, because we had to then go back and add in the sound of circling the photos, and trying to get the timing right for that was really difficult.
Of this situation, for at least.
Whereas if we'd actually done the sound at the same time, I think it would have made our job of editing much more simple. We also found that the only speech that we had in our production was actually recorded after, and because it was a different person speaking to whose was recorded, getting the sound to sound just right and be in the right lip movement was so hard to do. And then when we managed to finally get it perfect, the voice just didn't sound right for character, so then we had to keep editing it to try find the right voice.
Hello, Sarah.
So we've learned that with technologies, sound is really hard to get right, and especially with having to add music and Foley and ambience afterwards anyway, having the little bits recorded would have been a much easier task. We feel that one thing that has improved a lot since the preliminary task is the use of the camera. We found that in the preliminary task we didn't really know what we were doing, we were still learning, and so many of the shots that we had were just simple, basic, straight shots. We tried to do like shot reverse shot and over shoulder, but it still wasn't that great. I mean, there was a few shots like the pan which just didn't really work as well, so we ended up cutting more out, which means we had less footage. Whereas if we knew more about the camera and the shots, we would have been able to have much more footage. To overcome this main task, we first of all tried to do a much wider range of shots. For example, in the film opening, you only actually see 2 or 3 shots of the male character doing his writing and looking at the girl. But we actually filmed about 20 different ones, so that we had the option of using these if we wanted to. And I mean, not all of them were great, but because we had the option, it made it much better to do. And we also found that having the variety means that even if we did 20, at least we had one good one. We did this in all the locations, we did many more shots, which is something that we learned to do from failing doing this in the preliminary. We also had much more interesting shots with the use of the camera. For example, the small pan from the close-up of his face to his hand, because that was just simple and it really got the character engaged just by using the camera. The same with using the shot reverse shot of seeing him in the car looking at her, and then you see her at the kitchen just making herself a drink, nice and innocent, and then you go back to him. So I think the use of the camera improved so much from the preliminary task. Even like in the girl's bedroom when we had her using the mirror, but the camera was actually the mirror, so it was a more interesting shot. It really engaged the audience. We also did this with the shot of the fridge. It was a much more complex and interesting shot, which I think really adds to our film opening, rather than it just being a shot of someone's face and then a close-up of an insert shot. So I think the range of shots and angles improved a lot just because of the camera use.
When we edited our preliminary task, we found that our editing was quite basic and didn't look very good when we came and we'd finished it. But that's only really because we didn't really know how to use the program Premiere very well. But as we started using it more, we found it easier to use when we were doing our film opening. So we've made it much more interesting. For example, we've used split screens and we have titles up at the beginning and the time and date of when each shot was taken kind of thing for our film. We thought that this looked effective for our titles at the opening with our crackly radio, because we thought it added to the effect of it being a stalker along with our title Victim, which we thought went really well with what our theme was about. In our preliminary task, all our lighting was exactly the same. It was all quite white and basic, and it wasn't really very good. But for our main task, we changed the lighting, we changed the brightness and contrast when we were editing it, which we figured out how to do on our own. So we thought that made it look a lot more interesting, and it might make the audience think it was a better film and encourage them to watch it and think highly of it.
One thing that we learned from the preliminary task was how important the acting and the setting was. We found that in our preliminary task, we chose the setting as we thought it would be good for the storyline, but then the actors didn't really fit into this setting. We also felt that the acting in the preliminary task, we thought the male character was good, but the female character just kept smirking and it didn't look like it was serious. It looked like something that A-level students had made, not something professional, which we didn't like. So when casting for our main task, we decided that we'd really choose our characters based around who we think would be appropriate for that part rather than just who was available, who acted. And we think this went really well because the stalker looked a lot older than the girl who was the innocent young naive girl, Sarah. But also the setting was important because the age of characters in our preliminary task was just kind of like late teens, whereas they were set in an office, which was kind of a bit random because late teenagers don't normally just hang out in offices. So that's why when looking for the settings, we made sure that we thought the setting was perfect for our film opening. And I think we did this really well because the male actor worked really well in the setting of the shed, as he was quite a dark character. So we had a dark room, which was quite scary, and we thought that he did look quite scary in like a long black coat and things. And then the setting of the girl's bedroom, we also thought went well because it was pink and purple and mirror and makeup and really girly, which was the look we were trying to go for a character, because I mean, she was short and blonde. So this is why we think that the setting and acting we chose a lot better for this task, because the characters fitted in much better with the location, which then made the film opening seem much more intriguing than the preliminary task, which was just simple and basic and just didn't really work as well. One thing we also found for the preliminary task, we didn't really concentrate on the mise en scene, which was in the setting. I mean, the office was good, but in the office there was just a computer, a couple of books. We hadn't really thought about what would actually be in the setting. So in our main task, we really thought into great detail about our mise en scene. For example, in our first shot, there was the male character. He had all these photos which we had gone out and taken. Not just photos of the girl, which we just had. We went out and took them like she'd been stalked, which added more effort, but I think it worked well because it's the detail that counts. There was also things like having her laptop, his laptop, but with her Facebook page on, and then next to that had a big black camera, which looked a bit old-fashioned, but looked like something that a stalker would use. We also made sure that there was a crackly radio there and a clock, because that is something that you heard in the sound, and if that hadn't been there, then the sound would have been a bit, well, random. So we made sure we had the old-fashioned radio. We also had like a pencil and things which just added to it, rather than just him sitting there, he was doing something, whereas in the preliminary it was just kind of like, oh, what are we going to do now? This was also the same in the setting of the girl's bedroom, because in the actual room, there's a TV where the mirror was, but we didn't think this looked very innocent and naive, just having a big widescreen TV. So what we did was we got a mirror, which is called a princess mirror, and we put that in front of the TV and then spread makeup out there. So this makes it seem much more innocent and like her room, rather than just using the setting which we had. We adapted it to how we think it should be, whereas in the preliminary we just used what we had.
Overall, we think that we've learned a lot from making our film opening, and that it has greatly improved from our preliminary task. Although there's certain bits of it that we could have done to make it easier for ourselves, we think that by not doing what we probably should have done, it's expanded our skills and helped us become better directors or actors or anything. We feel that we've greatly improved from it. Overall, we think we've done a really good job and we're really pleased with our end result.